This is funny. They will hear my voice, but I'm on the far end of this thing, so we don't have a wide enough angle lens. But I'm going to call this meeting of the Religious Display Committee to order. For now, that's what the name we have so far. For Thursday, June 6, 2019, I'll ask you to please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. First order of business is public comments. Are there any comments from members of the public who are here tonight? Please state your name and your address, please.
Paul Antolini, Jacobs Lane. I'd like a couple of things clarified. One thing on the agenda says consideration of approval of minutes from the special meeting Thursday, April 25th. If it didn't count that this committee, is that referring to this committee's meeting?
Yeah.
If it didn't count, then how can you approve it?
We'd probably skip that because I noticed that too.
And another thing is, they were questioning before we were officially open this meeting, that you said nothing was voted on at the other two meetings.
Except the officers.
You don't have to worry about anything, but nothing was on record. So I think that anything that happened before tonight should just not count. I mean, I think the discussion should just start all over. So
Well,
there's.
Okay, thank you for your opinion.
And the third thing is, I'm wondering how this happened in the first place. That I understand, you gave an explanation before,
Yeah.
that you just wanted it to be a casual committee, and the lawyer alerted you, the town lawyer, that
Town attorney.
you know, you needed to do it a certain way and the committee needed to be sworn in. How would you not know that? How would you not know that?
Okay, I'm not going to answer any questions, Paula.
Okay.
You're welcome to your
It's
opinion.
a statement.
Okay, fine.
Okay.
That's
All
fine.
right.
I've explained it.
Well, you didn't explain it while the meeting was open. You explained it off the record. So,
I'd like to know also how that mistake was made.
I just explained it.
But
There's
can you
really
explain
no
it on the
further
record?
explanation. I decided, okay, so we'll put this on the record. I decided that I wanted to have more of an informal committee to facilitate discussions, as well as not be burdened with political affiliations, which I think is completely irrelevant in this context. So I structured the committee that way, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen with the other two selectmen, by the way. Was informed by the town attorney that it is improper to do it that way, that any committee has to be formalized, has to be sworn in, and has to comply with the state law. So we checked everybody's political affiliation and found that we were within the guidelines or within the law of the state statutes anyway, so that political consideration became irrelevant. In fact, as I sit here, I couldn't tell, I didn't even remember who belonged to what party, but it didn't matter. So it's being corrected. And that's where we are today. So, moving on, is there any other public comments? Yes, sir.
Yeah, Victor Holomakov, 74 Maple Avenue,
Did you
Bethel.
spell your last name? I'm sorry.
H-O-L-O-M-A-K-O-F-F,
And your address?
74 Maple Avenue.
Thank you.
Yes.
No, I just wanted to be present because I just heard through the grapevine certain things going on with, the placement of the nativity scene, which the church has, we've been involved in for a long time.
Mhm.
And we just went through a lot of, financial upgrading of that this past year.
Mhm.
So I just want to be kept kind of in the loop on where we're going to stand with all that at the end of this. So with the placement of that,
Mhm.
if we're going to still be able to do that, or if we're not going to be able to do that anymore.
Oh, that's
Well, we're glad to have you. Welcome.
part of the purpose of the committee. Any other public comments? Yes.
Hi, I'm Marlene D'Amico. I live on Rockwell Road. And
I'm sorry, what was your name?
Marlene D'Amico. And, New York City allows a life-size nativity in Central Park. The Catholic organization erects it every year. And if a city as diverse as New York City can be tolerant of a Christian symbol, on public property, I think that we need to see what's wrong with our town, that we can't, there's so much animosity and so much discord over a symbol of peace. So that's my thoughts.
Could I comment on what you said?
No, this is public comment.
All right.
So,
Yeah.
okay, so, and I see a lot of, different arguments coming around town over everything. Everybody's arguing over everything. And some of it is really hurtful and hateful and personal attacks on good people. And I think that everybody should stop and see where those attacks are coming from. And if it's somebody that you're affiliated with, try to reel them in, because it's ugly.
Thank you.
What street do you live on?
155 Rockwell Road.
Well, thank you.
Any other public comments? Okay, hearing none. Dan, was there any
There's no
correspondence?
correspondence.
Okay. Consideration of approval of minutes. I don't think you need to vote on this because that was discussion. So we can, unless anybody noted any description of the discussion that you thought was incorrect. It's really sort of irrelevant though, as was pointed out. So unless there's any objection, we'll skip that item. Okay. Item, let's say, to the main point of the meeting. This has discussion of open areas for displays. I think, and I'm gonna share a personal opinion with you, because I have reviewed some of the other material, I've reviewed the previous meetings, and I think that, I think this is a difficult topic for this group. I think that you should, this is a recommendation on my part, I think you have to start, or you should start with the fundamental question of yes or no. And we reviewed, and in this, you may wish to think about this for a while. You may wish to have me bring in the town attorney for your next meeting, formulate questions for him. Because as it has been described to me by multiple attorneys, also by the readings I've done, to the point that was made by Mrs. D'Amico, displays of this nature can be placed on public property.
Yeah.
But if they are, you cannot edit any other display. In other words, you can allow displays, or you can, of a religious nature, and it's specifically religious. So to your point earlier, this is a religious display committee because we already have zoning regulations in place for other types of displays, banners, signs, things of that nature. This specifically involves religious displays because of the constitutional issue that's involved in it, and the previous court rulings that have allowed them in some places and disallowed them in others. So the central question is, do you wish to continue to allow them on public property? And what you have to debate, and what you have to understand is that, and again, I totally encourage you to list all your questions, and we can arrange for your next meeting to have the town attorney in here so you can question him directly, as well as bring in any other resources that you might like. But if the answer is yes, then you must allow, or the town of Bethel must allow, other forms of display that people may or may not approve of. To use the specific example from the last holiday season, I want to commend the people who worked together to allow the secondary display to go up, the banner that was a Happy Holidays banner, but I know that there was an objection to the word atheist on it. We cannot edit that.
I have a question with that.
Okay?
Is with the nativity
Yep.
or the lit Christmas tree
Yep.
or holiday, I don't know what you call it, I mean, everything is so politically correct. The nativity certain people may interpret that as a Christian symbol.
Mhm.
Personally, I don't. You know, I look at all the symbols as part of the holiday. It's not, I don't look at that and say, that's a Christian symbol.
Mhm.
It was not labeled as a Christian symbol. There was no wording on that that said, you know, the Christians of Bethel welcome you to this holiday season.
There is wording on it. that
What,
says
wait,
this.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
Just to establish rules, that we're gonna have one speaker at a time and make sure that we respect everybody's time, so please
Okay.
continue.
Nope.
In the reading that I had done, I can't recall exactly where I had seen it, it did state that if a church was taking specific ownership of that, that was not considered appropriate, as opposed to a public display as part of a recognition of the holiday.
Mhm.
I had a problem with the banner because it went specifically to atheists. It didn't say happy holidays. That would be like having a banner on top of the nativity saying from your happy Christian neighbors.
Mhm.
I found it offensive.
Mhm.
It's not my fault that the atheists don't have a quote symbol of their beliefs,
Mhm.
the way other religions may have symbols of their beliefs. A menorah, a nativity, a Christmas tree, Santa Claus, colored lights versus white lights. You know, it gets really silly. And I thought the nativity was done in very tactfully handled for public space. It was not, I didn't look at the nativity and say, oh, that really should be on St. Mary's front yard, or the Methodist church, or this church, or, you know, it's a symbol of the holiday.
Mhm.
Just like if there was a menorah, I don't look at that as that's representing a specific synagogue. It's not specifically relating to any particular religion.
Okay. Well, there are, I think you should write that down, and I think we should have the town attorney come in, because I'm not gonna try to cite case law, but I've read that there are court cases that sided with you as a nativity being a secular display. There are many others that said, by its very structure, it is a religious display, as is a menorah. It means a specific religion, and it cannot be confused for any other religion. But again, I think you should write down all the toughest possible questions you can, and we should have an opportunity for you to ask the town attorney that. Fran, you had your.
Yeah, I
hand
have
up
to
there?
disagree with you because I went over the Supreme Court decisions and I believe I went through that during
For
the
the
first
record,
meeting.
I'm not taking a position one way or the other.
Okay.
I'm citing what
I'm
I've read.
just, the latest cases, I'll cite Lemon versus Kurtzman, says that it's not a religious symbol, that it's been around so long, it's a cultural and historical symbol.
Yeah.
And in some cases, you know, you can have, candy canes and Santa Clauses.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
You can, or you
I've
can
read
just
that.
have it
I've
alone.
read that case.
You can have it alone. And the Lemon test is, as long as it passes 4 different things, it can, a creche can remain on public property because it is no longer considered a religious symbol. It's considered ceremonial deism. And it's, you kind of like pretend. And the various Supreme Court cases that I looked at said that it's okay as long as you pretend. In other words, we're all pretending. You can look it up. That as long as
I'm questioning the use of pretending.
yeah, that's the actual word they use in these various cases. They said, it's ceremonial deism. In other words, we're pretending that it's not religious, and as long as we do that, it's considered not religious because it's been around so long that it's historical and cultural. And as long as it passes the Lemon test, then, and I could go through that, then it is not religious and it can be on town property. And they actually said There is no concrete, easily identifiable answer for determining what goes on public property, and they said craft whatever policy you want, and then of course show it to your town attorney. And this is
Right.
citing like 7 or 8 cases,
Right.
Supreme Court cases, so it's really a muddle, and, but it's not considered religious, not anymore.
Well, I think that the main point is, if you're going to allow it, you have to allow others as well.
Not necessarily.
That's not what I have been instructed by the attorneys.
Go back to the wording.
Yeah.
So,
Legal.
okay, bring your cases.
I will.
Because that's, I mean, this is the point that we were last November. We have no right to say no to another display. That is very much agreed upon legal doctrine right now, as I've been informed. And again, we'll bring the attorney so you can see, yes.
As long as the other displays also pass the lemon test, that's
Yeah.
the whole point.
Right.
Is that,
Yeah.
you know, you have a law in place that says if it satisfies A, B, and C, it's 3 prongs, not 4, but it's 3 prongs, and if all 3 are satisfied, then it doesn't mean you're automatically in, it just means it's constitutional, it's
Yeah.
allowable.
Okay.
But that's still, my feeling about this committee is that even if it's constitutional and allowable, is it desirable? Is it practical? That's the whole point.
Is it neighborhood friendly?
Right, that's the whole point,
Right.
is, you know, prong 1, is it legal and constitutional? And prong 2, you know, is this what we want?
Yeah.
Do we want like 20 displays on a small little piece of, you know,
Yeah,
land?
right. Well, what are those 3 or 4 prongs?
Okay,
whatever?
so the 3 prongs are first that the display must have a legitimate secular purpose.
Right.
So, 2, not have the primary effect of either advancing or inhibiting religion. And 3, not result in an excessive entanglement of government and religion.
Government is not involved, right?
Right. So, well, an entanglement of it, so that the government, that there's not a pull between, and we're creating a pull almost right now.
There's no coercion or endorsement.
Exactly.
Sorry, what was the second one?
The second one is that it doesn't, does not have the primary effect of either advancing or inhibiting another religion,
Thank you.
or its own religion. So it's not saying hey, let's all be Catholics, let's all be Christians, let's all
Right.
be Jews, let's all be atheists. It's just, you know, it's just there.
Excuse me, First Selectman, can everybody identify themselves so I know who's speaking?
Holly Heslin.
Well, you wanna start?
Oh, would you like to go first?
Sure, Diana Nadeo.
Francis Pulley?
Robin Dabbing?
Holly Heslin.
Tim Martin.
Aaron Vincent.
Mary Shepherd.
Danielle Monroe, but I'm unclear as to why you are making a comment in the middle of our session.
Because I don't know who's speaking.
Public
Okay,
comment
so-
was closed.
Yeah, now we're, true, good point taken. What was the 3rd prong again?
That there's not a result in an excessive entanglement of government and religion. So ultimately what Francis said is that the town of Bethel would not be advocating
Right.
specifically for
They're
any
storing
one
it, they're not
display.
putting it up, they're not taking it
Right,
down,
they're
they're
not
not
having anything to do
maintaining
with
it,
it,
they're.
right.
Not on their government property.
Right.
Okay. All right.
In the general framework of the section here, it makes it sound like that if we allow it, that we have to allow everything religious and non-religious. It specifically says that in here.
Yes.
So if we have it and somebody wants to come and put a banner advertising their store, I
No.
mean, is it?
No,
So it's,
non-religious refers to atheism.
Where does it say that?
where does it draw that line? To say what?
That's open to interpretation. I mean, we're not gonna, it doesn't apply, well, there's already zoning regs, as you're probably aware, that apply to commercial
Right.
signage.
But if somebody just wanted to put any sign up and just claim it's for non-religious reasons, I just want to put my display up, my message. not affiliated with anything.
I don't know.
Right? I mean, it almost seems like having regulations for religious displays makes sense because there's some constitutionality specifically addressing religious displays.
Yeah.
But then it's pouring over into the non-religious, which should already be covered in the world of zoning and the world of everything else.
Well, actually, it is. Beth was gonna be here tonight, I think she got detained. But there are regulations already in place that prohibit signage, that we'd have to deal with that too.
Right.
But the purpose of that sentence was just to not exclude a sign that was put up by a person or group that is an atheist. So that's all the non-religious, I wouldn't get too hung up on that, because that's all that non-religious
Got it.
refers to. But, you know, that's what this committee would have to try to tackle and come up with a recommendation.
We also have to talk about the number, the size, the placement.
Well,
And
if
what-
if your determination, your recommendation is yes, we should allow it, then yeah, you're right. You'd have to, not only that, but how to allocate it. And I'll give you an example. In one of the discussions we had with the town attorney, one of the other selectmen said, well, I don't see a problem with other displays, you know, we'll just have the creche over here where it always goes. And then, you know, we can worry about where the other things go. And the attorney said, no, you know, you can't just arbitrarily say, oh, this one display gets the premier location by the tree. If it's going to be an open system, whether you have a lottery or something, you can't guarantee that any particular display is gonna go in any particular place. You have to say, these are the spaces that are open, this is the date that we're gonna accept the applications. And if you remember, there were already guidelines as to size, you know, safety and things like that. But then you'd have to have some method of saying, okay, this one is gonna go here, however you wanna do it, a lottery. But you can't play favorites and say one gets a better location than another.
That's gonna
Why
be
not?
very difficult,
So
deciding that.
The National Menorah in DC is in the same spot every year. So if I were to go down to just public land, national public land, but public land nonetheless, and say that I would like that to be selected by lottery because I want to put a nativity set in that spot, they can't say, well, there's a precedent for that spot, or should they vacate that spot, it becomes available, or whatever this, they can't. There has to be something, or I can't believe that somebody would not have tried that, whether it be a nativity set or some others. There are clearly the nativity set that's in Central Park, there are certain public space that is allocated, if for precedent, if for,
History.
just pure, so everybody knows that's where it's gonna be every year, and it's not like, well, where the heck is it this year?
Yeah.
And we go check the lottery results to see where the menorah is gonna be. Now, if that spot became available, then sure, who's gonna get it? If it's now open again, there probably has to be a random, you can't just randomly pick, but it doesn't seem logical that you would have to move the display at arbitrary random every year. We also have a limited number of spots. There are some spots
Well,
where
that's the key.
physically
Yeah.
you can't put
That's
certain displays.
You're exactly right. I'm not gonna try to answer that because I'm not an attorney, but my guess is, when we have Marty here and you can ask him that, if you have a space as big as the National Mall or Central Park, there are places of equal value where they're all visible. You have a lot of space to work with. We don't have that situation here. We have very limited space. So not all spaces are gonna have the same visibility. But again, let's write that down. Let's have Marty at the next meeting.
Is there any chance that there are additional spaces beyond the three the town proposed already?
I haven't kept up with it. What did they propose?
P.T. Barnum Square and two small islands?
Main Street Island and Libby Island.
Oh,
Sounds like a prison.
there's other places,
Matt,
but,
there's those 3 places that Park and Rec said were available.
yeah.
And I just talked to Beth on the phone, Beth Cavagna from Planning and Zoning. She apologizes, she had an emergency come up. She was supposed to be here and it couldn't be avoided. And, you know, just from the discussion that we had with her, and she was going to come tonight, it's really the 2 areas, the Liberty Island and Main Street,
Libby
Main Street,
Island.
near the Congressional
Libby
Building.
Island and Main Street. Those are such small areas that they're, you know, you probably wouldn't be able
You
to
couldn't put
put
one of the
anything
small
in there
back.
anyway.
Yeah.
So you're really
Put that-
just looking at P.T.
Yeah.
Barnum.
So I guess one of the questions I have, which leads to the premier spot, is why aren't there other spots? There's plenty of other town land, whether it's parks, whether it's for the library, and I don't know, I'm sure there's different spots that you can't do it for various reasons, but why can't we try to get the more that we have available, the less this becomes in play?
You can, I mean, if you wanted to open up the parks, as I understand it, and again, I think we're gonna wind up tonight formulating a very long list of questions, but as I understand it, there's a difference in visibility between P.T. Barnum
Yeah.
Square and if you put something down at Bennett Park, who's
Yeah.
gonna see it?
Right.
You know, you can't say, you run into the problem of one display having a premier location that's highly visible and another one being salted away where nobody's gonna see it. And that's the problem that we have to overcome if we're gonna look at other places.
I would just like to say that the law often doesn't reflect fairness either. It's
Yeah.
about what's constitutional.
Yeah.
And as long as the town of Bethel, as long as this committee and the town of Bethel finds that something is constitutional and has a good reason, a reason that, and of course, I'm sitting here as just a regular committee member and trying not to wear my lawyer hat, but as long as, you have, whether it's precedent or you have good reasons as to why, let's say, for instance, because we know what the elephant in the room is the creche, the creche
Yeah, right.
being in that one place that it's been every year, okay? And that's created a precedent. And the fact is that as long as the town of Bethel, as long as it's constitutional, number one, it passes the lemon test. And number two, the town of Bethel and those appointed to make these decisions have a good reason for keeping it there, then it doesn't matter that it may not be fair to other smaller displays, like they don't get that spot. Just like the menorah always gets it gets
The
that
menorah
spot.
spot.
Right,
Right.
it gets its spot and that's it. And yeah, sure, I'm sure that maybe a Christian group would love to have that spot for a creche, but they don't get it. And there's a good reason for it. It's constitutional and there's reasons behind it. So I'm just throwing it out there that I don't think it should be about everybody getting equal access and rotating.
Yeah.
It's really gotta be what makes the most sense, because to me it wouldn't make sense to move the creche somewhere where it doesn't fit spatially and put
Doesn't
like
have power,
you know,
doesn't height, doesn't.
yeah, and then just put like a lollipop sign, where it is. That doesn't make sense to me.
That's an excellent point
You know.
about, it's so
I mean,
good
we
to have a lawyer.
It would not fit, I mean, arguably, these other spaces that are made available wouldn't fit.
Right,
There's also not power there, there's a lot of
right.
different.
There's a lot of
We're
reasons.
talking about
Considerations.
safety as well.
The safety, you put in an island, it becomes a driving,
Yeah.
Right.
literally, they don't block your line of sight, but,
Mhm.
and maybe if there's additional sites, that would be a different story, but working within, at least the list we have so far.
So I just would be interested to know how that reasonable, decision gets made as to who gets that spot. And
Yeah.
certainly, there is a longstanding tradition of having that one there, but again, if another group wanted to come in, regardless of what that affiliation is, I'm not sure what the solid argument is to say that they get to maintain that real estate versus somebody else.
That would
getting
be
to take it.
that would be up to the town in terms of proving that it's not arbitrary and capricious, not just like, oh, we like the creche, we like it there. That would be a violation.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But if there are sound reasons why the creche works there, and it's constitutional, I think you satisfy.
Well, let me play devil's advocate with you, to test your thinking on that. So let's say we have the creche where it has been, and somebody wants to put up, the satanic group,
Right.
which, by the way, was nothing more than a sculpture of an arm holding an apple with a serpent around it, and it said knowledge at the base. But let's say they wanted to put up a, fairly large display. And we said, well, there's no room over there because the creche is already there, and so it's gonna go to Bennett Park. So who's gonna see it? I mean, do we wind up in court fighting that argument?
Well, I would say, my feeling is that as long as the reasons behind the creche being in its particular position were made mindfully and with legal ramifications and not arbitrary or capricious, I think it holds up. It only, if only for the precedence factor, you know?
You'd have
I mean,
to
that's
manage-
there.
You'd have to give a list of available spots.
Yeah.
There are some spots that have been selected, and if, you know, by precedent, by whatever rules the committee comes up with, that, you know, this spot is gonna be made available to whoever's had it. If they vacate it, then it goes to a lottery process, and until it is vacated, it's whoever's, whatever the rules are, which that's the purpose of this committee, then they're following them. When that comes in, then it's, here's the list of available spots. Now, if you were to say, I totally agree with you, if you were to say, we have a spot behind the shed
Yeah,
in
it's
the
like-
field,
yeah.
in the,
Yeah, behind the
Or
park and rec
arguably
building,
along.
yes, right.
Yeah.
that would be a constitutional problem, absolutely. So you would have to have a list of spots, hopefully bigger than the list we have. And then these spots may have to have certain restrictions as to what could go on them. Like literally, you could not put the nativity set on Libby Island, which you couldn't do.
Could not what?
You could not put the nativity set on Libby Island because it would be a traffic problem, it would be a safety issue, there's no power there, it wouldn't fit. In the logistic, it wouldn't fit. So
Yeah.
each of the spot may have to have certain criteria as to what could safely go there.
Mhm.
But I do think there has to be something said for the precedent. If not, it becomes a round robin of what's where.
But I
Well,
think that that's an important discussion.
I don't,
Yeah.
Okay, I do.
Well, yeah, precedents, listen, our
Precedents
law is
matter.
based on precedents.
Precedent.
I mean,
It's
so we live with
literally
precedent.
Supreme
That's
Court
right.
You know,
based on
But
precedent.
I agree, one of my suggestions would be to look at the time frame too, so that maybe some of the more prime spots share the real estate, you know, so maybe if the creche is gonna stay where it is, cause there's power and at the price, maybe its length of being put up is shortened, so that maybe another group could be there beforehand and then be
Or another
removed.
time of year.
Right,
There
or
could be
another time of year, right.
Passover, there could be a different.
Right,
It
exactly,
doesn't have to just
exactly.
be.
And that's
Okay.
something that I
Right.
think the committee is losing.
I'm not
Right,
advocating
exactly.
tyranny of the majority, but if 88% of the population of Bethel is Christian, and maybe 1 point whatever percent is atheist, I mean, why are we being swayed to having to perhaps move the creche if the majority of the people in Bethel are Christian? And a very, very small percentage, I don't know what the percentage is, what the percentage of people, residents in Bethel, are atheist. I'd like to know that.
Write it down.
Okay.
That's.
What about putting it to a vote of the people? Popular vote.
Yeah.
I don't
Wins the
think that
prize.
constitutionality and discrimination issues should be voted on, so I'm gonna put my voice out there and say that that's not a good precedent, in my opinion, to put something like that to a vote, because minority rights matter as well.
They do.
Well, they do matter. and
Minority
votes-
rights matter,
and that's
but
how-
we're also talking about, as I said, I'm not advocating tyranny of the majority, but the majority does.
You're advocating for having a vote, which means that the majority would rule.
I'm not advocating a vote, I'm just saying that we have to take the percentage of people who are Christian in Bethel into consideration, and the minute number of people who are atheist.
If you don't know what the percentage is, I don't think using minute is an appropriate.
Well, I'd like to, do you know what it is?
I don't.
I'd
So
like to
I
know
wouldn't
what it is.
assign
Do
a
you know
term
what
to
it
it.
Can I just
I
say
do
that
not,
I
and
think
Well,
that
hold
it's,
on,
I would
one
like to
speaker at a
get
time,
what it is.
please. One speaker at a time.
I just
Holly.
think that it's inappropriate to pass on to the citizens of Bethel
Yeah.
a decision that there's more to it than just, do you like the
Voting.
crash, or do you, there's also, you know, zoning regulations and safety concerns and stuff, so I think a vote, you know, as much as, listen, majority rules in everything that we do
Yeah.
in life, including the law, however, it's, in this particular context, we have people who were put in positions that have more information and knowledge than we do, and I certainly don't wanna vote to put something somewhere that it would be unsafe, so
Right.
I think it would be inappropriate to put it to a vote.
I would like to see us be able to be as inclusive as possible of the
Yes.
minority without the minority trying to push the majority. You know,
Right,
I mean, I think
exactly.
that there is something to be said for not just trying to flip it for the sake of flipping it.
Well,
You know, you need to be as inclusive as you can, but
My primary concern has not been removing the creche. My primary concern has,
a lottery removes the crush.
I'm sorry?
A lottery removes a decades
No,
old
it
tradition. of
potentially
annual
removes the
crush.
creche, but let me finish my statement, please. My primary concern has been as evidenced by the meetings that we did have leading up to this, that there is a significant portion of the town that is not interested in sharing any real estate with certain groups, and that will be very displeased should we try to put a different kind of display on the same real estate with the creche. So that, to me, is a big issue that our town needs to either come to terms with or not come to terms with by not having the issue. And I think that's what you were trying to mention earlier in the meeting. I think that's an important part of the conversation, that whether we get to it tonight or not, we really have to talk that through very carefully.
By the way, I was reminded that the other display areas, which you pointed out, the limitations, are the only places where that can go.
Why? There.
Well, actually, on the basis of visibility, so that there's, that people can see it, but we can revisit that if you.
I mean, I would argue, living up in Stony Hill
Yeah,
before, I wasn't by P.T. Barnum Square rarely, but I was up and down Shelter Rock every day, and McCower and Bennett, and the entranceway, you're not gonna relegate it to the back, but in the front, it's very visible.
you mean McCower?
Well, McCower or Bennett, it would have to be close to the road to be visible, sure.
We'll
In front of
take
the
it.
library, or on the corner of the?
Library is, under state law, you have to go to the library.
Okay,
I mean, you'd have to go to the library board and have them develop their own policy.
got it.
Because we have no ability to, no right to tell them what to, like when the sculptures were out there.
Yeah.
Library board had to vote on that.
Got it.
But I'm gonna
That
write,
explains it for the state.
yeah. Okay. What else did you have? I wrote down the triangle by Shelter Rock and Payne. Can you think of any others?
Matt, it's P.T. Barnum Square.
Yeah.
It's at this four-way, the little plot of land right there, across from the liquor store,
Yeah,
okay, there.
The little garden.
And then the little area down from Congregational Church.
I think that's
Drive around it.
reserved for the Blue Star Mothers.
Blue Star Mothers,
There's like
Blue
an
Star
island in the middle
Mothers
of the road.
is on the other end of town.
Yeah, right, yeah,
The only
right there.
place you can put it,
Okay.
what he said.
So those were the only three places
Yeah.
that it was agreed upon between planning and zoning and park and rec that would give equal amount of visibility and was not being used like the Blue Star,
Yeah,
moms,
right.
That makes sense.
and was town property that could be used for this.
Okay, well, then I wrote down, for consideration to discuss with the town attorney, the big triangle that's right on the corner of Shelter Rock and Payne. Because that's a three-way intersection, and there's a Welcome to Bethel sign there that potentially could be considered an equal visible because of its proximity to heavy traffic coming into town. So that might be possible
I
as
think the
well.
more places we have, the more, there was discussion about having too many things in one place, there was
Yeah.
discussion about visibility, there was discussion about
Height.
practicality of some of the islands.
Yeah,
To your point about them having more options in New York City or DC, the more options there are, then the less some of this stuff becomes an issue, unless it's an issue just out of, I want that spot because I want that spot,
Yeah.
But as long as there are alternative spots, then, hopefully sounder minds can realize that they still have that visibility and they get to still do the display and, but if the policy is, formulated in a way and we apply it consistently, then
mhm,
I'm hoping that, and that's for the attorney, I'm hoping that covers us
Mhm.
legally.
mhm. Well, I think one of the questions that you need to write down is to ask the town attorney, can you reserve a spot for one display as long as you have displays for any other entities that want to do it? Or does that have to be open? And let me give you for example, and I'm gonna test your thinking on this just because I want you to consider every possibility. So let's say we have a lottery. Let's just say for discussion's sake, that the two best locations are P.T. Barnum Square and that triangle on Payne Road. So you got the middle of town, you got the north end of town, both heavily trafficked. So let's say we have the creche, and let's say we have the knowledge. right? And we have a lottery. So you pick Creche, and you pick the location, and it comes up Shelter Rock Road. Is that gonna be acceptable?
I think you have to give some thought to the precedent that's already been there.
And you'll
Well,
have,
that's the question. Yes, that's, because I can't answer that.
and
I
say,
don't know that precedent continues to work if we're gonna say this is open. I'm not even, I have no opinion about that, and that's something we have to ask the attorney.
May,
would it
can
be
I,
acceptable?
excuse me,
Oh,
Yeah,
can I just, I'm trying to keep a running total of questions.
yeah.
So before we go any further with discussion, can I just make sure that I've got the ones that you want so far? Okay, so what area of land is available? Not what's fair, but what's constitutional.
Right.
Why do the majority have to be conform to the minority? And can you reserve a spot or / grandfather a spot?
Yeah, well, Ted, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the question is, do we have the right to say the creche will be by the Christmas tree over there because that's where it's always been? Right?
But-
That's what I
There's
meant by
been no
grandfather.
applications, and as long as they apply every year, you know. And again, I think that's, again, I speak to the menorah, but I speak to just the logistical of not having it move every year.
right,
Of
yeah.
going, all right, let's go to the, you know, where's the menorah this year? Where's the, you know, and I think there's a lot of things that come up in the same spot every year. Now, if somebody vacates that spot, sure, there would have to be a process in place to figure out how you're gonna give it out again. To
Yes.
not look biased, to say, well, what's the next best one? I get that. Maybe a lottery. And there would have to be an application period and then whatever,
Yeah.
a drawing.
Right.
But so long as that spot is there, I don't see,
We have it in Bethel. We have the Blue Star, that they don't ever move. And I'm not saying I would want them to move.
correct,
Yeah.
what if
Yeah.
I want their spot? Can
But, I
challenge it for
mean,
this
but the
year?
point is that we already have a precedent
Yeah.
of one thing staying in the same spot.
Diana?
So one area we got stuck on at the last meeting was regarding the timing of the variety of holidays and celebrations that exist during the holiday season, and then what happens when one overlaps with another, and in thinking of fairness, allowing everyone the same amount of time. So I guess like the question around how do we establish a time limit for if something is going to go up before the nativity scene goes up, how that is reconciled, and on the other side, like if there is anything throughout December that extends into January, we could, from my recollection, talked about that for the majority of the meeting and not being able to determine what the appropriate length of time was for each display. So I would want to know how we would set that in a way that was fair to everyone and didn't involve, well, your holiday, your display bleeds into mine, so therefore yours has to come down, right? That wouldn't be acceptable.
Okay.
But then what happens if the majority, I mean, I think it just becomes a slippery slope and brings up a lot of problems with determining the timing of things and the location of different displays.
Fran, did you have?
Well, yeah, now we're getting very complicated because we're not only have
It
to
is
decide.
complicated. It's a
very
complicated
complicated, but you
issue.
don't have, I think it's becoming very complicated because we have to decide like what goes, you know, what is going, where it's going. And when we talk about, so that's point one. And point two, when we talk about the lottery, we have to consider safety.
No, that's true.
Not just precedent, but safety.
Mhm.
And also the, you know, moving the creche, which was a big deal, you know, with heavy pieces, and we just can't pack that up like it's a, you know, like it's a dollhouse and plop it someplace else. So,
Every year.
It's been
Twice.
proposed that we put it on the front of the Methodist church.
Mhm.
Wouldn't go up there. It's on a trailer.
It's
up on a hill.
Yeah,
Yeah.
actually, it's
Doesn't
very,
make sense. It
these
can't
guys-
go on these islands. It can't go, it needs
they're
power.
pros.
There it
They are
is.
pros at
There
doing
is a
it.
lot of, and we can figure something, there's a lot of logistical issues that people are like, why don't you just put it somewhere else? Okay, you know, it's, come out there in January and take it down, it's a little cold. But, you know, there are different considerations, and with very limited spots, you know, you're right. So You know, the Crush were to draw from a lottery of all available spots, well, there's one.
Yeah.
You know, right now, that met the criteria I just put on, if you factor power in, but that's the only one. Arguably maybe the other side of the tree, you know, but that's it. But I still come back to the idea of there being, you know, some precedent and having, you know, so you apply for one of the spots that are available.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's really what it comes down to, like, you know, and.
So you're
and
saying-
fairness not being a factor, I think
I
it's
think
actually,
that-
it doesn't matter if it's fair, there's a lot of laws that are not
Yeah.
fair.
Life is
I can
unfair.
rattle those
No,
off,
it's
all
not.
right, but-
I, before you make a decision based on that, you really need to speak to the town attorney, because that is not my understanding, is that there is a fairness factor that has been in some of the court decisions.
As long as it's not discriminatory, that's the whole point. The
Well,
fairness comes into, is the purpose of not being fair trying to discriminate?
Right.
Yeah.
It's not about, if the purpose of fairness is just to, one needs power and one doesn't.
Make everyone
You know,
happy.
So I'm just saying, I don't represent this board, I happen to be an attorney, but I'm trying to not wear that hat. But I can't help but say, look, life isn't fair. Therefore, laws aren't fair. It's just, are they legal? Are they constitutional? And is there a good purpose behind not being fair?
Is it
That's the whole point.
Is it consistently applied? Is it applied fair across all groups?
Right.
Once you make the rules, a lot of it comes into not excluding and not,
Right.
and 100% agree. But, you know, my understanding from reading it, there's a lot of instances where something is in the same place every single year, and I can't believe it's not challenged. If it has to be a round robin thing.
You can bet it's been challenged and
And
it's.
it's lost.
Right.
Right.
So the Methodist church is the one that's across from Caroluzzi's, the one that has the little kind of sloped front
No.
yard?
No,
It's gonna be-
no.
It's across from English Street.
Methodist Church across from English Path.
So that's right next hill that goes up?
Where they have all the pasta
Wall, and
dinners.
they put- There's like the walkway goes around and up.
I'm
Yes.
sorry, what was that?
Yeah, so the wall, probably a football,
Okay.
their lawn.
So it can't, I'm just wondering, it can't be put there, it's too big, there's not enough power, it's a hill, is that why it can't be
It's
put
on
there?
it is
It's on a
built
slope.
on a trailer, and you would literally have to drive a truck up, I don't think you could, I don't know if you could with a ramp, or, it's not, logistically, it would not be very practical to pull a trailer up on top of that, of its weight, and then remove it at the end of the year,
Okay,
or at the end of the season.
so you couldn't like back it up and then move it
It's
off?
a wall.
I'm
It's
trying
as
to
high
find
as
a
the
picture
wall.
for you,
Right,
Mary, there's
it's like
a.
As high as this
Walls
table,
and then
there's a
there's
sidewalk on
that
either
too.
side, and the sidewalk would not be wide enough to back it into.
Okay, I'm
Well,
just curious,
As
because,
mentioned, it's
I mean-
private land.
Right, exactly.
But the
Well,
church had, the other church, or that church had offered to have it there at one point?
As an alternative if everything was, but.
I'm
limited
not,
for-
Well,
I'm
we-
just curious, because I mean, it seemed like, this
If
is
they
a
choose to
picture
erect
that's
their own
a great
nativity spot, it
picture.
would be a good spot for it.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like it would be a
If
pretty
they-
good spot for it.
If they want to erect, St. Mary's erect one, but this is about having it as
In
a
town.
cultural icon on public
Right.
space.
I pass. I was
Okay.
thinking of something else.
So you're playing
Oh,
pretend tag.
yeah, what I was gonna say is if we move it to, that spot, well, we can just disband, because, it's solved. We're not, no one's using, no one's using
Other
public property.
people can still apply to use it.
Yeah.
You still have to have a policy.
So then there's nothing to fight over, if we just move it to, but we don't wanna do that, because then,
Actually, if this whole issue had ever gone before planning and zoning, they probably would have turned it down a long time ago. It's not consistent. It's something the selectmen decades ago just decided we're gonna allow this to be on public property, because Richie Straighten pointed out at one of the earlier meetings that it didn't used to be. It used to be on church property, the original creche. It moved sometime after 1970, I think he said, to the town green. And planning and zoning said, all right, it's their deal, but it actually is non-conforming as it exists right now. If this committee came back and said, you know what, we can't resolve this without offending people, we're just gonna suggest that every display be on private property, there wouldn't be any. That we would go back to planning and zoning's restrictions that exist today.
Yeah.
And there wouldn't, they have specific allowances for certain types of lawn signs, like for nonprofits, like the spaghetti dinner, things like that, the Scotty Fund, temporary period of time, not encompassing an entire season. And that's probably what would take effect if this committee were to make a recommendation that no religious displays be on town property.
And that is how it has been handled in several surrounding towns in Connecticut, probably because they didn't want to deal with the potential lawsuits that can come from it and
Yeah.
spending a lot of money on legal entrapments. I'm gonna guess. I wasn't sitting on those committees, but definitely that has happened in many surrounding towns, so I'm gonna make a guess that that's probably why.
Well, we don't want to hear that word lawsuit. We want to resolve this in a very friendly way, you know?
So then we probably shouldn't talk about pretending that something isn't religious when we all know that it really is. That's not very.
I'm going by the Supreme Court decisions,
Just pointing
which
that out.
Holly clarified.
And I think that sometimes, you know, to be devil's advocate, sometimes elected officials or volunteer officials on committees that make these decisions that are not legally trained are scared by people who threaten lawsuits.
Yeah.
And
I'm
so,
not threatening
no, I'm saying.
By any means, nor
No,
did
no,
I.
no, this
Let me
wasn't
just get
direct-
that on the record because
Okay.
I am
I
tired
wasn't
of being
dir-
told that I am.
I wasn't
as a
directing
part
it
of
to-
direct-
I was just
appreciate that.
answering.
No, but
I
that's
apologize
the
if
same.
you
I'm
took
tired
it
of
the
that.
way-
But back when this whole thing started, back
Nobody
in
threatened
December, there was talk
Maybe
and people got
citizen didn't,
upset.
but the,
Good,
And-
one at a
like,
time, please.
the organization.
The message was not very clear. People heard the word lawsuit and NAA, not NAA, what is it, ACLU.
ACLU.
And people got, you know, scared and upset. And, but maybe that's not the message you wanted to give, but that's the message that some people heard.
But you can
And
hear
so,
what you hear. That's never the
Well,
message
then
that was brought out there.
where did people hear this from?
I
So there was a-
think I can answer that
There
question,
was
but let's not do
there was
it
a
on
muddled
camera.
message, there was a muddled message from your group back in
There was not.
December.
There
And,
was
well, then
not.
why did people get the impression that if we didn't do something fast, we would be sued? And right away, that made people
Because, Fran, they didn't
angry.
like the idea that something else was going on the lawn, and a lot of.
That's not true. That
It
is not
is.
true.
Things were
People here are
not
very
done
reasonable. People here in
In
this town are
order.
very reasonable.
Things were not
Yeah.
done appropriately.
That's a different thing.
Yeah.
That has nothing to
Right.
do
The
with
message was
lawsuits.
that tied into.
No one said anything about a
It was
lawsuit. It was not.
Well,
Can
I
the
just say-
American
can I just-
Atheist Association
Yeah.
threatened the town.
They did
that
not.
if the town
We didn't make it up.
refused
read
to
all
do
of
this,
Okay.
they would be forced to look into suing the
Yeah.
town.
Mhm.
I would
No,
like
they
to,
said you need to comply with the law.
I would just like to
I'm sorry,
apologize.
I wasn't coming at
Using
you.
the word
I just
lawsuit
need
because
to put that down.
I was addressing your comparison to towns around us.
Yes.
That perhaps the reason that they didn't, because they were worried about being sued, and I was saying, well, there's the flip side of that. Perhaps since I was not present and
Yes.
you were not present,
Yes.
perhaps the reason could have equally have been that they just don't want to deal with it. They don't understand that there wouldn't be any successful lawsuits.
That is also
Okay,
possible.
and so they just wanted to avoid it. And I think the fact that we have all of these citizens volunteering to be here to resolve it says
Yeah.
we're not afraid of lawsuits. What we want is we want our town to be together, come
Right.
together, and make a decision that works, but that nobody feels strong-armed or feels like, oh, if we we have to be politically correct.
Yeah.
That's a problem for me. I want us all to get along, and you know what? Somebody's not going to be happy.
Right.
That's right.
You know, that's life. Somebody's not going to be happy.
But some-
there was a letter from, Dan, do you remember the name of the organization?
It was the Atheist Association.
It-
There were
from-
several letters.
Yeah.
Based in Wisconsin or someplace,
Hmm.
that had read about it in the paper, and they did say, you must open this up to other displays, or we will consider.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the
So
word
that-
was
so that-
out
yeah,
and
that's-
people
So
got
there was-
upset and it didn't add
There were
to
lawsuits.
And it
good
just
public
so
relations.
happened to surface after someone's application did
Well,
not
that's
meet
it.
criteria.
That's
Yeah.
irrelevant. I mean, it's a
Well,
matter
but
of law.
that was the timing, and that's what got people's panties in a bunch.
Yeah.
Well, I wanna back up a little bit and just give us some perspective on this. This is not a new issue. This goes back decades, many decades. And some towns have been able to continue displays under certain conditions, to the point that Holly and Tim made. Other towns have been told, no, you can't do that because it is not constitutional. You know, it's very complicated. It depends, there are Supreme Court decisions and there are lower federal court decisions from the 9th and 5th districts. You know, some cases allow a creche as long as it's with a Santa Claus and lollipops. You know, it depends on the context. So nobody on this committee, including me, can make a blanket statement that anything we do here is constitutional. We're gonna have to speak to the attorney and weigh the,
Yeah,
as I'm sure Holly would agree, we're
Right.
gonna have to weigh the factors and try to make the best guess we can. So I think that what this last 20 minutes of conversation boils down to, and correct me if I'm wrong, is can the creche stay in its present location because that's where it's been, basically?
yes. Could we
That's
take
Not
a
it.
vote?
just,
Can we
that's
take
where
a
it's
vote?
been.
Can any
But
thing.
the other thing, well,
But-
no, yeah.
Right now, the
it's
only
not-
thing that
the only
has
thing
any
that is
precedent
the
more
issue is
than
the
a
crash.
year
Yeah,
is the
right.
crash.
And so does the precedent matter?
Yes.
Or not?
And likewise.
And safety.
There was another display last year. If that display applied again this year and won at the same spot, should this spot go, if you apply by X date, whatever the date we decide
Right.
is, should that spot go to them first? If they do not apply, and then it becomes open
Okay,
as an available spot.
okay.
And it would have to be not just applied to the crash.
What if they want the spot by the tree?
No, so going forward, if that spot is vacated, if we didn't apply.
Okay,
for it,
okay, but what you're saying is that the creche would maintain that spot
Yes.
unless they voluntarily left, correct?
As could the banner that was there last year.
Yeah, let's vote on
Okay,
it.
all right, well, that's the essence of the question.
Almost, first selection goes to whoever's had it the previous year, if they apply by X. If they
Okay.
don't, then it becomes
Yeah.
available and goes back into the pool of available spots.
Okay, all right,
Can
so,
we vote on that?
no,
No, we need to
No.
have legal consultation.
it's a
Oh,
question.
we have to
It's
wait
not
for,
a- yeah,
Marty?
It's a question.
Okay, so can you reserve a spot / grandfather a spot? Blue Star was given as an example that it's,
That's, I would have to disagree, because that's sort of like the Doughboy statue, it's a permanent
Yeah.
fixture. It's a permanent installation, it's not a,
okay.
it's not a
okay.
temporary holiday
You
based.
could argue there's room on that spot for other banners,
Oh, yeah, as long as it doesn't impede traffic, sure, yeah,
Right.
that's possible.
but we were said that spot wasn't available because it was the Blue Star spot. So,
And who wants to take up?
And I-
Yeah,
know,
who
I'm not-
wants
I-
to-
Yeah, I mean,
Just
I mean, that would be
That's
kind of
the whole-
sacrilegious to
Right.
put something there, you know?
agreed.
yes, yeah, I agree. I just brought it up as devil's advocate because
Yeah.
we in our own town have the precedent. And remember something, I mean, it's about, not just about the fact that it's precedent,
It's respect.
but there are other factors in why if we decide as a committee that like the creche could stay there, it wouldn't just be about precedent. I think there's lots of factors that go into it, and including it needs power. It's
Safety.
It's safety, you know,
Logistic size.
just all of that stuff, I think, and plus it's visibility. I mean, and I think you have to think about what the town wants. I mean, I think all of that, and I really, I commend everybody for coming here because it's not easy to share your opinion and to get shot down. And listen, on social media, I get beat up a lot, and
Everybody's taking
What
the
is
shots.
that
Yeah.
like?
Everybody's
yeah,
taking
I
You know what the
yeah.
easiest solution is? Get off.
And I think I'm being respectful, but
Successful.
it is. So I mean, I thank you everybody for even having the nerve to speak up. And
No, we appreciate your expertise, Holly, very much.
thank you.
Okay, so, what other questions
Yeah.
do we need to have answered before you can make a reasoned?
Are we able to limit the number of displays that would appear on any one piece of approved property?
Okay,
It would depend on size,
We have to get legal,
yeah,
That's a fair question, like if you, logistically, if we only
size and
had
placement.
10 spots
Yeah.
and we had 12 applications,
yeah,
you're excluding somebody, not by a choice to exclude, just by only have 10 spots.
Yeah,
And where does the law come into that, where, is it the first 10, is it?
yeah.
I think that's a good question, because we do have limited spots.
Okay,
And-
so limit of approved spots on a location.
And-
Which gives further
Okay.
reason to try to get
That
more
was my
spots,
question,
because
yes.
then
And
it
that would
helps
be
alleviate
size, you
concern,
have to
but-
worry about
Okay.
size, so.
I just want to get the gist of this, and then I think the attorney can
yeah.
pretty much
Right.
be able to,
Well,
you know.
we're gonna give him a nice comfy chair right there in the middle,
Put them right there, right on camera.
so, yeah,
We'll watch the video.
and we're not allowed
Okay.
to do this, right?
well, yeah, right.
A question I'd have for the attorney as well is when you get into this lemon test, who is performing that lemon test on each different display? If they pass the lemon test in previous years, obviously.
Who's the judge?
It is, yes, who is looking at that? You know, somebody comes along and they wanna put something up that, you know, that in the public's opinion wouldn't pass the lemon, who makes that determination?
The
By
court
the way, why
does.
is it
Yeah,
called a
court
lemon
does.
test? Is
Because
that-
it was just, that was the plaintiff's name.
Was
Yeah.
that the
Was
case?
Lemon.
Lemon
yeah.
versus Kurtzman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It wouldn't, the lemon test is not applied by you or me
Yeah.
or
Okay.
our first selectman. It would be if somebody challenged it, and that's
Right.
how the court would apply.
And the word is reasonable.
Gotcha.
And it's
Reasonable.
always a reasonable person standard for anything, by the way. So what would a reasonable person say,
Yeah.
you know, Santa Claus represents? What does a reasonable person say a crucifix represents? I mean, those are the things. So think about it in terms of what reasonable people would believe.
Mhm. Okay. All right, what else?
I'd like to address something that, what's your name again? Robin said about the title of this committee, that it's, and I said it should be proper use of public property. And something I've mentioned to you, and I mentioned to a few people, the art displays, public property. Nobody in town had any input into that. You know, who said that art could go on public property, all those sculptures? And we already had two waves of that.
Mhm.
You know, it's the same thing, it's the same issue.
No, it's not.
Proper use of public property.
It's not-
Who
not at all.
decided that art goes on public property?
The Board of Selectmen did, and it's not a constitutional issue. Religious displays are a constitutional issue. You
But it's
cannot
still
compare.
proper use of public property. Who put those up and, you know, I
We
had no,
can-
that's public property,
Yeah,
taxpayers'
It's not,
property.
it's, okay, your
Isn't
opinion
that
is noted,
related?
but it's not the same.
It's not related.
No, not related at all.
I agree, I think this committee was formed specifically to address religious displays.
Okay, I just wanted to bring this up because a lot of people have a problem with, you know, public property, how are we using it? And then they see, now we have empty cement slabs that
Yeah,
are safety
those are,
hazards.
yeah, let's, why don't we stay on the topic? Those are
Okay.
gonna be removed, by the way.
But, okay, but I'm just
And
saying
it's
that we're talking
okay, there are-
about proper use of public property, and
there
I think
are-
the two issues are related.
No, they're not related whatsoever. You go do your internet search, you will not find a single Supreme Court case about somebody's sculpture being on public property.
No, I'm
In
talking
fact,
about local governance here. Who decided that art goes where it did?
I said that was decided by the Board of Selectmen. They permitted Bethel Arts, an independent nonprofit, to put those up. So if you want to talk about that with the Board of Selectmen, you're welcome to do so. But that's not.
Okay, I just
the
wanted to
purview
bring
of
it
this.
up because I think the two issues are related.
Okay, I
Not
believe that-
religious, but it is proper use of public property.
Okay, yeah, well, this is this specifically is religious.
All right, all right.
If we were all debating sculptures,
No, but I
wouldn't
mean,
have this
I'm just
conversation.
addressing the point, Robin's point. It's proper use of public property.
We're talking not just for the holiday season.
No, we
We're
are,
talking-
we are talking for the holiday
Well,
season,
what
we're talking
about-
about religious displays.
What
That's
about
the
around
purpose.
Easter? That's a religious time.
Right, so
What
the
if somebody
religious-
wants to put up
Okay,
who
well,
knows what?
An Easter bunny.
okay, then if the Board of Selectmen would like to expand the purview of this committee, it can do so, but the way this was structured by the Board of Selectmen was to deal with the holiday period from Thanksgiving past New Year's Day and specifically religious
Specifically
displays, so that's,
that period of time, not what goes out there. For instance, if people wanna,
nope.
you know, have a bonfire to, you know, bring in spring or whatever they do.
Mhm.
The summer solstice or
Yeah.
something.
It's very interesting that these issues are being raised when, to the best of my knowledge, and being in town for 45 years, nobody has ever asked for that. Nobody's
No.
ever asked to put up an Easter display, bonfire, anything like that.
But because they can, they will.
They may.
Well,
You're
yeah, because
absolutely
this
right.
issue has come up,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
this is exactly why
Some people
some,
think it's respectful.
some
Yes,
munis-
exactly.
some municipalities in the United
And
States have
protect
said,
the town, you need, I feel that you should keep that in mind to protect the town.
I think we had well, unfortunately, you weren't there at our last meeting, but we had a lengthy discussion about that at our last meeting.
About,
Should the
About
policy-
the amount of time, and if this is one holiday season and this is another holiday season, and which groups can put stuff, excuse me, long day, which groups can
In
put
the
things
overlapping,
in different
which was
locations,
what
in different, that's right,
Diana-
that's what Diana was speaking to.
Yeah.
We talked about Easter, we talked about summer, we talked about all the different times of year. We looked up how many holidays there are on the calendar when you talk about all inclusive of all religions and all,
Right.
and it's overwhelming. So I agree with you that that is something that needs to be decided. Are we just talking about these months?
I
And then are
think-
we
yeah.
opening ourselves up to a challenge? If somebody wants to put something up there, that I defer to the Board of Selectmen, that's their call, as I understand it. But yeah, it has to be part of the conversation.
So-
This is
Is that,
complicated.
well, that's an
Yeah.
interesting question. Is the purpose of this committee to recommend only on the holidays, what we're defining as the November, December, January? So
Yeah.
it's not to, so if, would create, and I guess this is a question for the attorney, would creating a policy that addresses only those couple months be problematic for anybody who applied the rest of the, you
Why-
know,
why
would you
can't-
apply a different set of standards to somebody who applied to use Ramadan or Easter or
Yeah.
whatever?
Why can't the same standards be applied
Why not
once,
just
once
have a
you,
standard?
Yeah,
once you have a, if you've decided you're gonna use the lemon test and you're gonna use precedent, you're gonna use
Right, once you're
statistics, I think it works anytime. I don't think
Yeah.
it necessarily has to be, oh, let's have an Easter committee, you
Yeah.
know,
It could be a
Yeah.
concern to just have a policy for those couple months.
So as the
You may
committee
need a
for
religious display
religious
policy
displays, we should
or
be
process.
considering that.
Yeah, good question.
Remember, we're just making a recommendation.
Yeah.
The
Absolutely.
Board of Selectmen are gonna decide, you know, whether or not to adopt any or,
Mm-hmm.
you know, none of our recommendations.
how advisory are we? 50%, 2%, 95%?
Advisory.
You know, we're here, we're spending our time here, how,
It's a yes or no question. It's
I just would like to
advisory.
know.
I don't know, I can't answer that.
All right.
It's gotta go to the Board of Selectmen for a vote.
I have a question.
Yes.
Why is it just an advisory committee?
Yeah,
Because under our charter and under state law, the Board of Selectmen has to create, this would be effectively an ordinance. And that's where the authority lies. Let me tell you something. If I could push this monkey on you guys and say, all right, hey, whatever you wanna do is great with me, I'd do it in a heartbeat
I bet you would.
and let you guys take the heat.
I bet you would,
So,
yeah.
that answer your question?
Careful, James. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, any other questions you can think of?
well, I just want to make a summarize something. I think we can assume that we have the creche. I'm not saying that we have the creche where it is, but as far as the number of displays, there's the creche, possibly an atheist banner or whatever you want to do. There might be, maybe the Jewish population here will want to put up a menorah. I don't think we have to imagine that we're going to have a zillion displays. You know, I think we're making this a little bit too complicated.
And I would disagree
So,
with you and say that I think we have to be prepared for anybody and have a
Yeah,
precedent, and
but
have
if we
a
look at
established.
the history of this town, it isn't like this has been, people have been knocking on the door wanting to,
But perhaps
yeah,
now
this-
people,
maybe now, but we have to be reasonable.
Well,
What
perhaps
is,
people
what
will
is
be
our,
encouraged
what
to
is the
do so.
history of this
Right.
town
Right.
suggest?
So we should
If
be
we do any
ready for
kind of a
that.
study, what is it, what do we, you know, if we look at our history, you know,
Well-
what can we expect? So, I don't think that we're going to have you know, 50 different groups saying, we want some real estate. I mean, we may, but I tend to doubt it. And by assuming that, and then talking about Easter, we're just making it much more complicated. Let's just try to keep it simple.
I disagree,
and,
I think we need to cover all of our bases, that's what we're here to do.
We can also limit our jurisdiction. We can also limit it.
You can't limit it by saying that we're only going to talk
And
about
then,
these three religious orientations,
no,
we're
no,
not
no,
gonna talk about
no,
any others.
No, what I'm saying is limit what we're going to address.
It might be
Limit what we're
logistically
going to
limited by the
address.
number of spots that are available.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That
yes.
comes back to a previous.
Yeah,
Well,
we're
well,
making it
let's-
too complicated, we can limit what we're going to address. I'm not
That-
talking about limiting the number of groups.
That is,
Right.
I'm not talking about that.
that is another question that we should pose to the attorney and explore that. Whether opening it up, see, the whole premise, the whole reason we're here is that, and by the way, let me digress just for a moment. This is not a new issue in Bethel either. My first Christmas here in office, I'd been in office for a week, and a Jewish couple came to see me and said, you know, if we're gonna have a crash on that thing, I wanna put up a menorah. So you know what I said? I said, okay, great,
Yeah.
propose one.
Yeah,
And they didn't do it
Yeah.
because they were testing the waters, but this
Right.
comes up every
Right.
year. And, you know, in a way, Bethel has existed in a little bit of a time warp where we've been shielded from this, and the rest of the world has gone through these discussions and the pain of coming up with a policy, whether it's yes or no, a long time ago. We're going through it for the first time. But, you know, to the point that's been made, yeah, these will come up.
yeah.
There will be challenges.
I was standing next, at the creche dedication, I was standing next to a fellow who's Jewish, and I said, where's your menorah? And he said, we just haven't gotten it together like you Christians have. We don't have anybody sponsoring us, we don't have any display, we should do it, we will do, but we haven't done it yet.
Yeah.
And
So it isn't like
organization,
we
that people
said, you
get
know,
in there.
you can't, you know, be here.
Let's
Um,
sort of, you have to ignore
so-
the historical precedent in that sense too. Things change over time.
Yeah.
don't they?
And, but nobody was, my point is, nobody was saying you can't have a menorah, he said, we just haven't gotten it together.
Understand that.
So, and it takes effort, it takes effort.
Takes a lot of effort.
Volunteers and Mark, Tim, you know, you can speak to that. So, money, yeah, funds and
Well,
resources.
to the first part of your statement just now, though, that it looks like we have the creche.
No, I didn't mean that. What I meant
All I was
was,
gonna say is that's something that you have to
no,
determine.
I'm not saying that looks like we have the crash, I'm saying that if we're talking about the different possible displays, I
Yes.
don't think that we have to imagine 50 different groups knocking down the door. We will have possibly more, but I think that if we think that where are we gonna put all these groups?
Yeah.
We might be imagining a situation that really will not happen.
But it'd be great to be prepared for it in case it does.
Well, here's a application that came in.
But what's reasonable? I mean, we could be bombed by some country, but you know, how
It really
reasonable?
doesn't have
What are you
anything to
saying,
do with
Matt?
the scope of
There's
this
Yeah.
conversation.
I mean, like, how reasonable
No,
is it
hold
to
on,
expect
hold
that,
on,
that,
hold
that
on.
50 different groups are
Hold
going to
on.
be knocking on the door saying we
Hold
want
on.
a display?
Fran, please. I wanna pose another, what if to you, because this is real. One of the applications we received last December, which was withdrawn, was a Festivus pole. And they wanted it on the green with the creche. Is that acceptable?
I don't know enough about a Festivus pole.
It's a pole.
Isn't it just like a,
Like, I don't know what it means.
What is a
Well, that comes
like,
down to
what
it
is a
not,
fest,
is it
what is
religious,
a
non-religious,
Festivus
if you have
pole?
to allow non-religious, if we allow religious.
Yeah.
Would you allow somebody to just put a pole up in July, just because they feel like putting a pole there?
Yeah,
Would you allow somebody to put,
I have no idea what a Festivus pole is.
Yeah, I don't know.
You're not a Seinfeld fan, huh?
It's a joke.
Yeah, the
It's
festival.
a- it's a-
It's
It's a parody, it's a religious parody.
And so in my opinion, if, as a reasonable person, I would say, it doesn't make sense to me to allow displays that would be mocking or undermining
Yeah,
another religious, you know, I wouldn't put two religions that are so, you know, like, in my mind, I'm thinking Satanism and Christianity probably shouldn't be next door to each other,
Right.
but you
okay?
can't curtail freedom of speech.
No, I'm not talking about, I'm just saying, I don't think it's reasonable to have, or a sign saying, you know, let's kill all the Christians right
Okay.
next to that's all I'm saying.
So
Diana?
just as a question I would want to add, and it's come up numerous times in my mind, is how do we determine that?
Yes.
Like, it would have to be an objective decision. So where do we get the objective, not, like, saying reasonable is a very subjective statement. So I would want to know from him how, in so many different areas, criteria will have to be
Yeah.
created that is fair and equal and can be applied to all these different circumstances.
Well, I
Okay,
think
how
to
do we
Holly's point,
determine objective
Okay, I
decision
think
with
it's-
criteria?
do we have
like-
the right to say, oh, this is disrespectful, we can't put it up? My understanding, as I'm sitting here, is no, we would not.
well, if this
But I don't
says
know.
to, the primary effort is to advance or prohibit,
Right.
the question would be, do we? If it is,
yeah,
really is the primary objective to celebrate or represent or whatever somebody's organization that you're trying to include? Or is the
Yeah.
primary objective of a reasonable person, not an
Yeah.
extreme person, but a reasonable person, is the primary objective to try to mock, attack,
yeah.
dissuade, otherwise,
I think that's
you know,
pretty clear.
I mean,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
think, I mean,
See, but I don't
as a
think that
Seinfeld
that's
fan,
what
it
he's
literally was a joke, right? I mean, it was defined as a joke.
But it wasn't mocking Christianity or
No,
any
it
other
was
religion.
mocking the holiday season, just in general,
Okay, but-
the craziness of the holiday
Okay,
season,
but who gets to
What
that
group does
point,
it
who
represent?
gets to make that decision?
I guess a reasonable person. We have a room of
How
reasonable
would you
people, we'll come
define-
the other ones
Who
here. and
don't
vote.
agree with each other.
I think it's a
all
hard,
season?
it's a
Vote
hard
once
question
here.
to answer.
Once here, we'll come in and vote
But
on
you
the
know, the thing
applications
is, we-
that are not
By the way, there is a legal definition for reasonable person,
reasonable.
by the way. There is, it's not just what I think is reasonable and what you think is reasonable. There actually is, and Marty can speak to that. That could be a
Yeah.
question like, what is the reasonable person standard? He can tell us what it
We're
is.
talking about being friendly and neighborly, maybe reasonable is, friendly and neighborly and being respectful is part of this reasonableness. And I think we have to, I see you're smiling, Diana.
Smiling at Diana. My
Um,
name is Danielle.
Danielle, that is part of it, that we wouldn't want to hurt anybody else's feelings who are our neighbors.
Right.
And
Sadly, that
that
didn't
would, that would be part of this, trying to decide whether something is reasonable.
You take it away, when you have
Diana?
standards, when you put standards in place, you take away the personal part of it. You take away Danielle Monroe wanted this and Holly Heslin wanted that. When you have a list of what the standards are, then it's not what I liked or what Danielle liked. It's what the community had decided was appropriate and it fits within those guidelines. So you take away this, because if there wasn't a policy this holiday season, it became personal and it was ugly, both on social media
Yeah.
and, in person. So it was, I think this committee, the whole purpose is to put guidelines in place that takes that away. That's my.
Diana, did you have a comment?
I'm gonna pass.
You're playing bridge too? You pass? All right. Any other questions? Because to your point, Holly, I think that's the central thing. Do we have the right to say this display is disrespectful? So it shouldn't be next to that display. And I'll tell you, everything that I have been told and have read so far is no. We don't have the ability to do that. If it's gonna be open, it's gonna be open and you can't censor it.
But just remember something, that there are decency standards,
Of course.
So,
I'm not talking
and
about.
that's kind of what I'm talking about, like.
I'm not talking about
Right.
decency standards, obviously.
There are other laws that don't have to encompass these guidelines. There are other laws that reasonable people pass that can be applied. Is it obscene? Is it, so I don't think we
No, I
have to
know.
worry about
No,
that.
we don't, no, we don't have to, yeah, a giant naked
Yes,
whatever, yeah, that's,
exactly.
we're not talking about that. We're
Yeah.
talking about, just to use that example, is the
Right.
Festivus pole disrespectful, and do we have the right to say, no, you can't do it because
Right.
it's disrespectful?
I didn't know what it was, so I couldn't really, I was like, I've never heard of that before.
Well,
They had this similar controversy where they tried to erect where the Satanists tried to erect the knowledge.
Yeah,
There was nothing,
Right,
a reasonable person could look at that statue and say there's nothing
right.
There's nothing.
visually objectionable about
Right.
that sculpture, but the idea that it was representing, or actually not even,
group
the
that-
group,
Right.
right, was offensive. Just
Right.
as the atheists group was offensive to many people in town. That's the kind of censorship that I don't think we have the right to.
Well, it's at a certain level. I'm not sure. I would probably, and I am going to, even though we're gonna have the town lawyer, I'm gonna do some of my own LexisNexis research about Satanism next to a Christian thing. I'm just gonna see if there's anything about it, That'll be my part of a contribution next time.
so you and Marty will have a spirited discussion.
No, well, listen, he's the boss. He's the,
No,
but
no.
yeah.
You know,
Listen, you put 10 lawyers in a room, you'll get 10 different opinions, so.
Of course.
11.
Maybe 11. Yeah.
All right, I don't wanna keep you guys here all night. What other questions do you wanna have?
I have just a question, for you, not necessarily for Marty. Does the town have any type of diversity or a committee that focuses on building or developing inclusion and trying to think of the right way to word it.
No.
Like where they would have an action plan in place that they're working on building, appreciation of that in the town.
No,
Or
I
is that
understand what
does
you're
not
saying,
exist?
no, it doesn't, every department and our HR group, all have, diversity statements, and, you know, which is basically included in law, so compliance with ADA and so on. But no, we don't have a committee that focuses on diversity, no. That's a good question, though. All right.
Do we settle on another meeting? So
No, but, you know, if you remember the original charge, the Board of Selectmen wanted to have this done by June 1st.
Yeah.
So we moved the date back to June 30th.
So our next regular meeting would be June 13th, which is next Thursday. I don't know if, you know, Marty could be prepared for, you know, if we want to stick with the regular meeting or.
Yeah, I know.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes,
that's
high school
what we did, yeah.
I
graduation,
think there'd be
yeah.
a significant number of people that wouldn't be
Yeah.
present that night.
I wasn't even thinking about that. So with that said, do we, what would you like to do? Do you want to have the Board of Selectmen push it back and us?
Well, is this group right now, do you have your calendars? Can you pick a date, or do you want to have Dion send you an email and poll?
I can pick a date now.
I think, wouldn't it be up to Attorney Lawlers?
Yeah.
I mean, really,
Oh.
you know, and then
Well, yeah,
whoever
we-
of us could, you know, like, we don't all have to be here as long as we had a quorum,
Yeah.
you know.
No, I'd like, yeah.
Or you tell them, this is the night.
Yeah, basically. I mean,
I mean,
unless he,
I-
unless
It's on
he
the
has
payroll.
an ironclad appointment with a client or something, I'd just say you gotta be here.
Okay, yeah, I know my availability.
Okay, could somebody suggest a date? What do you-
Are we trying for next week, or are we trying for further out than that?
It's up to you.
Do we need to do Thursdays?
We don't need to do Thursdays, my 2 cents is, like having it within a 2-week period, to me, keeps everything very fresh and the
Yeah.
conversation going, and the gaps have made, have allowed it to be a little
How
disjointed.
about June 19th?
So,
June 19th has been suggested.
It's a Wednesday.
Okay, that's a Wednesday.
I can't do that.
As far as meeting room A goes, and this is where we have the recording device, I blocked off Thursday nights, kind of sticking with that, so it's easiest for me to get that room. If Thursday nights are working for y'all and we can keep Thursday nights, then let's just keep moving forward with that.
So you think the 20th?
So would the 20th work?
That works for me.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Works
fine with
2
me.
weeks,
Works for
20.
me.
Okay.
We have someone who it doesn't work
No,
for.
that won't work for me.
Is there anything else on the calendar that evening for the?
Let me check with Wednesday.
We have Board of Ed.
Board of Ed's that evening.
So, no on the 20th? Is that one?
I don't know what our standard is going to be. If somebody can't be here, will we still convene, or, and I'm not making that determination. I'm asking the group what we're going to.
How many people do you need for a quorum?
6.
So if one of us can't be here, that's not,
Well, I'm sorry, this is who was, we don't have anybody that, took the oath that's not here tonight, do we? I don't think so.
No, I think this is
everybody
the
could- 1,
point.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So yeah, we would need 5 here, not 6, I'm sorry, 5. So, we just need to figure out what, because at this point, we can vote this in as a regular meeting, and we can schedule, and if we go with that, with the 20th, and then we decide that we want to push, then push it out till the,
July 4th. is
then we
also
could
a
do
good
July 18th also.
That's such a huge gap. I agree.
Well, monthly meetings,
Yeah.
that's what commissions and,
Yeah.
you know,
What about the
committees
27th?
usually
What about
usually
the
run down
27th?
monthly
Right,
meetings.
I understand that.
Is this room available on the 27th?
Yes. So if you wanna do a back-to-back like that,
I think that they were, were you proposing the 27th instead of the 20th?
That's what I was aiming.
Do we think we're gonna need
Yeah.
2 more? Is that fair to say?
Well, and if we
Yeah.
did the 20th and the 27th and had intentions of coming to a conclusion by the 27th, then we would meet the date that the Board of Selectmen set for us and not have to extend that date out again.
Well,
I can
I
do
can
it.
make it.
Yep, I can do it.
I can do both.
Okay.
I can do both as well.
Okay.
Okay, then a motion would need to be put on the table to vote to have our regular meetings on July 20th, July 27th at 6:30 PM. June, I'm sorry, in meeting room A, and vote on that.
Okay, I make a motion to have our regular meeting on June 20th and June 27th at 6:30 here in meeting room A.
I'll second your motion.
Okay.
All in favor?
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Sorry, that was my job.
Oh.
I forgot. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, now, enough of all this fun stuff.
Mm.
Now you have to elect officers. Who wants to be chair?
I nominate Tim.
I nominate Holly.
I nominate Holly.
Oh. Nominations don't require a second. Who would care to do this?
Okay, can I just, who nominated Holly?
I do.
Danielle did.
And who second? Somebody needs to second Tim, and then someone needs to second Holly if there's a second for
I'll
you.
second Tim. Let's make it a four strikes.
Can you arm wrestle for it?
Well, somebody want to be chair and the other be vice chair?
I think we can, why don't we be co-chairs?
You can do that.
Be vice chair. Let's just take it.
Okay.
Great, that's good.
We have to vote on it.
Okay,
Okay.
so I'm sorry, you didn't accept the nomination,
I
Tim?
don't.
Okay,
Was that a no, or
No.
I didn't hear?
There was a no. I did not accept the nomination.
Oh, okay. All right. Holly?
I'll accept it.
Okay,
Thank you, Holly.
You're
thank you.
welcome. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, so are there any further nominations? Hearing none, those in favor of Holly being chair, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? You don't get to vote, Holly.
I know.
No.
I like
Did you vote
to.
against yourself?
Double dipper.
I almost did.
Okay, we'll accept the
I voted
nomination
against
for vice
myself.
chair.
vice chair. Any nominations for vice chair?
Tim Martin, I nominate Tim Martin, vice chair. You did say.
I second it.
Okay,
Accepted.
is that okay? All right.
Yes.
Any other nominations? Hearing none, those in favor of Tim Martin as vice chair, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? That motion carries. Thank you very much to both of you.
Do we need a
Secretary.
Um,
Oh.
Yeah, so we need a secretary. The secretary's function in this, we have a recording secretary, but the elected secretary would, let's say when you do create a recommendation, the secretary signs it on behalf of the board. So, who would care to be secretary? It's the easiest job in the world,
I'll nominate Mary. She had it last.
Yeah, right.
okay?
I second it.
All right. Are there any further nominations? Is that okay with you? Great. Those in favor of Mary as secretary, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you very much. That concludes the agenda, and I'll entertain Holly, you can take over at this point.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I second it.
All in favor?
Yay.
Aye. Any opposed? Yay, thank you. Thank you, everybody. It really,
Quiet we've all
it's
been.
very nice.
Okay, I tell you what I'm gonna do, well, and Matt, you tell me if this is okay, but I'll put this list of questions together. I'll send it to you as a board first to make sure that I've got things the way that you want it, and then I'll forward it to Attorney Lawler. Is that okay?
That's perfect, and I would also say, if you think of a question in the
Yeah.
meantime that's not in there, feel free to add.
Yeah.
We don't have to do it as a group, just to add questions, so that's perfectly
Yeah, and you'll probably
acceptable.
reach out to Marty, tomorrow, just to make sure that he's like not on
Oh, yeah,
vacation
I'll
or
get him,
something
yep,
like that.
yep. Marty's used to us bothering.
Oh, Marty's in Europe for
Such a
the
nice
next 3
piece of
weeks.
right